Stimați membri ai Academiei de Științe a Moldovei, dear professors Eva Kondorosi and Sierd Cloetingh, dear Mr. Philip Gabor Andras, Deputy Head of Mission, Embassy of Hungary to the Republic of Moldova, distinși cercetători științifici, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Printre personalitățile marcante care au conferențiat de la tribuna Academiei noastre se numără și profesorul Sierd Cloetingh, prezentând la 20 decembrie 2021 raportul Perspectivele cercetării de frontieră, educației și inovării în spațiul european de cercetare, fiind atunci președinte al Academiei Europene, The Academy of Europe, cu sediul la Londra, entitate care joacă rolul principal în consilierea Comisiei Europene. Pe lângă onorabila funcție de președinte al Academiei Europene, profesorul Cloetingh a fost pe parcursul a mai multor ani președinte al Asociației de Cooperare în Știință și Tehnologie în Europa. Voi menționa că în decembrie 2021, profesorul Cloetingh urma să vină împreună cu alți savanți, inclusiv cu doamna academician Eva Kondorosi, la Chișinău, unde era planificat susținerea a 3 lecții publice în Sala Azurie a Academiei. Dar din cauza pandemiei de coronavirus și a tulpinei Omicron, care se răspândea rapid la acea vreme, zborul cu regret a fost anulat. Atunci am exprimat speranța că în viitorul apropiat, vizita profesorului Cloetingh la Chișinău va fi realizată. Și iată că astăzi îl avem în calitate de oaspete de onoare pe reputatul profesor, care a scris o adevărată istorie în procesul de gestionare a științei europene. O istorie de mare succes reprezintă și activitatea doamnei academician Eva Kondorosi. Fiind mulți ani membru al grupului de experți principali la Comisia Europeană, vicepreședinte al Consiliului European de Cercetare, șef al secției Științe ale Vieții din cadrul Academiei Europene, cu sediul la Londra. I will bring some data from the CVs of our distinguished professors. Professor Eva Kondorosi was born in Budapest, graduated biology and received her PhD genetics at the EUTREOS University in Budapest. She was postdoc at the Max Planck Institute in Köln and visiting scholar at the CSU, Harvard and Cornell universities. She was director of the Bayesian Institute in Hungary. Currently, she directs the Symbiosis and Functional Genomics Unit at the Biological Research Center in Szeged. Her primary research field is symbiotic nitrogen fixation with a recent focus on plant control differentiation of bacteria. The current work led to the production of several highly potent antimicrobial peptides of plant origin, which are powerful, novel antimicrobial drugs to be used in medicine and agriculture. Her expertise is very broad in the fields of microbiology, plant development biology, cell cycle control, bacterial and host communication, molecular biology, genetics, biochemistry, and omics. According to the Scopus, she has more than 10,000 citations to her papers. Her Hirsch index is as high as 62. She is full member of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, a foreign associate of the National Academy of Sciences, United States, and member of the following institutions or bodies: Academia Europeană, the European Molecular Biology Organization, the German National Academy of Sciences Leopoldina, the French Academy of Agriculture, the European Academy of Microbiology, etc. Over the last years, Professor Kondorosi has collaborated with us efficiently, assisted in the promotion of fruitful collaboration with the Academy of Sciences of Hungary, She also assisted us to establish collaborative contracts with the Budapest hub of the European Academy and also with the Young Academy of Hungary. I have the decision of the Presidium of the Academy of Sciences of Moldova, and let me read the decision. Certificate, Dimitri Cantemir Medal is awarded to Professor Eva Kondorosi, full member of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, for supporting the European integration of researchers from the Republic of Moldova and significant contributions to the training of young researchers and highly qualified scientific staff by delivering public lectures. So is the decision from May 29th, 2023. So Professor Eva Kondorosi, I would like to ask you to come in front. Yeah, so I said just arrange this. Yes. It looks very nice. Now the document. Here is the document. Keep it and look at it. Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you. And I wish all the best for the young generation.
Yeah, a few words better here.
So this is a great honor for me, and this is really great that this distinction is given when we have the young generation here. So I hope that in the future we can have really good collaborations, also brain circulation with the young scientists and even students. Also in Hungary, we have similar programs when we involve secondary school students. We organize at different places, common laboratory works. Also, there is a mentoring program when 16, 17-year-old young students can come to my laboratory. We work together for a year and then they make a presentation. And this can give them really stimulation and they can see what is really a life for a scientist and how to work in the future. And which is very important, that you have to keep your curiosity and really solve the problems, and you have to go really to the big problems. And then after certain decades, you will feel that how much satisfactions you can get from science. It is not easy, but you will see it. It's worth to do and do the best what you can do. So this is one thing, but also we have to have collaboration with scientists and institutes. In whole Europe, we have other possibilities in the European Union, and we have to work on it. And you are also associated member country. So there are many possibilities. And I hope that we can really do something which is related to the science, which is working in my laboratory or in Hungary or anywhere where you can join to this international scientific community. So I am really honored and thank you very much.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Professor Sierd Cloetingh from Utrecht University. He is a distinguished professor. He received honorary doctorates from 5 European universities and numerous medals and awards. He is member of the Royal Netherlands Academy of Sciences, the Royal Norwegian Academy, the Royal Danish Academy, the German National Academy for Technical Sciences, the Heidelberg Academy, the Bavarian Academy of Sciences, and honorary member of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences. He was distinguished in 2014 as Knight of the Royal Order of the Netherlands Lion for his contributions to science and European scientific cooperation in research and education. I would like to tell you that his research interests are related to solid earth geophysics, tectonics, intraplate deformation, lithospheric dynamics, sedimentary basin evolution, sea level change, etc. International functions, here I have 2 pages of functions. He was president of institutions, associations, member of advisory boards, also chair, member of scientific councils. We will upload this on the website of the Academy. He also was in the editorial boards of scientific journals, also a lot of journals. And also I would like to note that honors and awards, it's just 1 page of different awards and honors. Professor Cloetingh, you really succeeded a lot. Yes, that we simply have no possibility to read all but we will upload on the web page. And I have the decision of the Presidium, and with your permission, I will read it. Dimitrie Cantemir Medal is awarded to Professor Sierd Cloetingh, Utrecht University, Netherlands, for supporting the European integration of researchers from the Republic of Moldova and significant contributions to the training of young researchers and highly qualified scientific staff by presenting public lectures of national interest. I would like to know that we will benefit from the visit of these 2 distinguished professors. Today, public lectures, and tomorrow there will be lectures in the frame of the summer school. So, dear professor, I would like to ask you to come. Oh, please, and I will. Very nice, very nice. So, and this is your document. Yeah, look at how it goes. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your warm words. And I am very happy and I feel deeply honored with this beautiful medal. I have 2 passions. One is earth sciences, and I will speak about this a little bit later on. Earth sciences is by its nature cross-border, and that's why international cooperation is so important. And my second passion is the European project. And when I walk around here in beautiful Chisinau, I'm so happy to see so many European flags. The European project cannot be complete without a strong involvement of Moldova. And science has always been a bridge between different countries. And the Moldova Academy of Sciences and its president is really a bridge builder between Moldova and the European community. And I'm very happy now to be a member of the Moldova scientific community. The more because I see, and it has been mentioned by Professor Kondorosi also, so many young people, and I see the strong engagement of this academy to bring them in contact with the frontiers of science. And I think this is very important for the future of science, but also for making the science of the future exciting. So again, a big thank you for this honor, and I'm very pleased to be with you here this week. Thanks.
Now I would like to ask the representative of the Embassy of Hungary in the Republic of Moldova, please, you have the floor. You may come here. Yeah.
Thank you, President. Dear students, dear all, dear members of the distinguished Academy, dear President, dear professors, who today this honor was shared to be awarded in this very place in Chișinău, Moldova. I have the honor to briefly say a few words in the name of Hungary, in the name of our embassy, as Deputy Head of Mission. I am very, very honored and happy to be here, not only because Moldova soon, we hope very soon, will join the European family as an institution also, but always culturally was part of it, and Hungary through the old centuries we know very much who were our neighbors and who are living in our region. So we appreciate your efforts, and as Mr. Professor from the Netherlands told us, culture and science is always a good tie between people, between nations, and we hope that soon also peace will dominate our region, and peace is the best friend of culture, and peace is the best friend of science. If there is no peace, nothing can be achieved. We also have this special honor to have a guest, Lady Professor Kondorosi, who is also awarded this day, and thank you for your contribution in scientific achievements of my nation and my country. And I wanted to tell you that very recently, Mr. Prodan, your Minister of Cultural Affairs, and our Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade, Mr. Sierd, they just signed a bilateral agreement on culture and cultural scientific cooperation. So this occurred on the 26th of May, and it has a detailed how to say a program, a path to the future, including cooperation between cultural institutions and all those actors who help the furthering of our bilateral cooperation. So I have the honor also to announce this. And in this framework, I'm sure that Mr. President and the board of the Academy will also find new contacts and new possibilities to join our European family, and especially Budapest as a hub of regional scientific hub and cultural hub. So thank you for all these. Vă mulțumesc pentru aprecieri, pentru profesorii care au onoarea să fie în centrul spectrului și care sunt prin contribuția lor apreciați de dumneavoastră și de Academia dumneavoastră. Vă mulțumim din suflet și așteptăm.
Ladies and gentlemen, now let's pass to the session of lectures, scientific lectures. And the first lecture, Nitrogen Crisis and the Path to Sustainable Agriculture, will be delivered by Professor Eva Kondorosi. So, dear Professor,
So, today I am going to talk about the nitrogen crisis because we are not talking too much about the nitrogen crisis and many people do not realize what are the problems. And I would like to propose some scientific ways how we can have a path to a sustainable agriculture. We know that climate change, environmental pollution, the energy crisis, food security and pandemics are among the biggest societal challenges of today. We have more than 8 billion people on the earth at present, and it's foreseen that this will grow further, and maybe by the middle of the century, there will be 9 or 10 million people. So the question is, how we can provide resources for the human population, provide fresh water, agricultural productivity, and food. Unfortunately, with a high number of humans on the earth, we have also problems because the human activity and demand for food increased enormously the greenhouse effect. There was in the atmosphere always CO2, nitrous oxide or methane, but with the human activities, this is really increased a lot. So we have now, all of you know, a lot of carbon dioxide, methane, and even, which is much more dangerous, this NO2, nitrous oxide, which is 300 times more dangerous than the carbon dioxide and can stay in the atmosphere for 100 years or even longer. So if we look at what are the factors which are increasing the greenhouse gas effect, you can see that agriculture is one of the major contributors. We have also a lot greenhouse gas produced by the electricity and heat production, transportation and industry. But nowadays, when we have the energy crisis, they try to really save or reduce the energy consumption. And probably agriculture will be the main contributor to the greenhouse effect. So this changed a lot our climate. So sometimes we have unexpected floods or prolonged heat waves and droughts. And it is foreseen that maybe by the end of this century, a large part of the continents will have problems of the droughts. Now, what plant can offer for us? Plants are the living organism which can produce via the photosynthesis organic molecules from carbon dioxide and water. So they use the energy from the sun and by the photosynthesis, they produce carbohydrates. But all of you know that the fourth element, which is essential for the life, is nitrogen. And without nitrogen, there would be no nucleic acid synthesis, there would be no proteins. So we have to have nitrogen. The air is full with nitrogen, but it is an inert gas. 2 nitrogen atoms is coupled with triple bonds, and this is very, very difficult to cut these triple bonds. So it cannot be used by none of the eukaryotes. Plant can use the nitrogen from the soil, but in the soil, only the mineral nitrogen, nitrate mostly, is used by the plant, this can be then incorporated in amino acids and nucleic acid, which is then used by the other living organisms. So all of us will get the nitrogen source from the plants. Now, if we go back to the growth of the human population, for 200,000 years, the human population was below 1 billion. And the major reason for that one was that there was not enough food. And there were also pandemics, and this limited the growth of the population. It started to change by the Industrial Revolution, when new machines were invented, new power sources were available, and this increased the powerful and effectiveness of the agriculture. And as there was more food, also the population started to grow. But the real invention which led to the explosion of the human population was the industrial production of nitrogen fertilizers. This really not only increased, but multiplied the agricultural productivity. So from that, afterwards, there was no problem to have enough food. Moreover, also the antibiotics were discovered, and their use also reduced the mortality. So these were the reasons. So the biggest invention for the human population was the industrial production of ammonia from the nitrogen gas with 3 volumes of hydrogen. And this was invented by Fritz Haber, who developed the procedure, and the industrial production was solved by Bosch. Both of them got Nobel Prize for this procedure. And to cut the triple bond of nitrogen, one has to use high temperature and very high atmospheric pressure and catalyst. So producing ammonia, this was the source to produce nitrogen fertilizers, and this led to more powerful food production. And this was really the detonator of the population explosion from 1.6 billion at the beginning of 1900 to 8 billion by now. Today, 80% of the nitrogen in our body is coming from this process. However, there are also problems, because to make a reduction of the nitrogen, it uses a lot of fossil fuels. If we look at the energy consumption of the world, 2% is used for this procedure. So this is an enormous amount, and now with the energy prices, it will cost even more. So it's also a question that how the current energy crisis will affect the production of nitrogen fertilizer and the agricultural production. So as I mentioned, why making nitrogen fertilizer is really an enormous benefit for us, it has also undesirable consequences. First of all, usually in agriculture, they use the nitrogen fertilizers in excess, and this is partly used only by the plant, and the majority will go in the groundwaters. It will degrade the soil, the water, and the air quality. And as I mentioned, this is a major source to have the nitrous oxide as greenhouse gas, which is contributing to the global warming. So when we grow plants, plants have to face and resist many stress factors. This can be biotic threats like virus, bacterial, fungi infections, parasitic plants, whatsoever. There are also the climate problems, flood, extreme temperature, more ozone, drought, wind, UV, and also problems of the soil, poor in nutrition, higher salinity. We have microbial diversity and different pH in the soil. But these factors existed partly, but which is really a problem now that human activities really destroy the environment. So we're contaminating the soil with heavy metals, microplastic. We use a lot of herbicides, pesticides. We have also burn diesel particles, and we have persistent organic pollution. So this led at present dominance of agricultural lands, loss of biodiversity, large-scale production of greenhouse gases, climate change, pollution of environment with fertilizer and herbicides, insecticides and antibiotics. And this resulted also resistance against these chemical products of pesticides and antibiotics. So today we have the problem of antibiotic resistance. We have pandemics, and pandemics will come also in the future because at this moment the antibiotics are not powerful enough, and there are many antibiotic-resistant pathogens. We have the energy crisis, we have the climate change, and even we have to provide more food for the growing population. So it's a question how to ensure a sustainable food supply for the growing need of human population, meanwhile preserving the nature. So one way could be biological nitrogen fixation. I must tell you that we have a lot of hope for that one, but we still need research. So this is not something which will give you immediately and final solution. As I said that eukaryotes cannot reduce the atmospheric nitrogen to ammonia, but there are some bacteria and archaea, they are called diazotrophs, which can do it. And they can do it because they have the most sophisticated enzyme complex which exists in the earth. This is the nitrogenase enzyme complex, which are built up from 3 different proteins, and they are also a dimeric form and heterodimeric form, plus having very sophisticated cofactors. But this enzyme can reduce the nitrogen to ammonia at normal temperature, using only energy which exists in the organism. However, which is very important, that unfortunately this enzyme is extremely sensitive to oxygen. So if we think about later biotechnological application, we have to keep this in our mind. So that nitrogenase enzyme was discovered and the gene already at the 70s. And then there was the naive idea that, oh, just we introduce the nitrogenase structural genes into plants and they can fix the nitrogen. But it is a very, very complicated process. First of all, you have to produce the subunits at given quantities, and you have to produce also the cofactors. So you can see on this figure how many genes are required to have really the nitrogenase activity. So this is not so simple procedure. However, as I said, bacteria, archaea can do it. And more than 60% of the fixed nitrogen on Earth comes from biological nitrogen fixation. These diazotroph can have different mode of actions. They can have symbiotic interactions when they make the nitrogen fixation with symbiosis. I will come back to this one later. And these are mostly the rhizobium bacteria, but it can be also associative or free-living asymbiotic interaction as well. So among all these interactions, the most efficient form occurs between rhizobium and legume symbiosis. The rhizobium does not mean a certain species. It is they can be alpha or beta proteobacteria, and they are not in one branch of the evolution. They can be sometimes much more similar to pathogenic bacteria than to another rhizobium bacteria. And here you have the Leguminosae or Fabaceae family. You know, these are the legumes, you know, the alfalfa, the pea, trifolium, and soybean, bean, glycine, this kind of plants. But which is very important, that the interaction between the bacteria and the plant is specific. So each plant has its own bacterium partner, or one can say that each bacterium has its own plant or own partners. This symbiosis is not obligate. So when the plant has enough nitrogen in the soil, it will grow, no interaction with rhizobia. But as soon as the nitrogen starts to be limited in the soil, then the symbiosis starts. It will lead to the formation of root nodules, and within these nodule cells, the rhizobia are present intracellular in the plant cells and are converted to a form called bacteroids, which are able to fix the atmospheric nitrogen to ammonia and immediately supply the plant cells where they live with ammonia. So this is a very economic form, and this is the best for the plant which can happen. Now you can ask how this interaction occurs, because you know that in the soil, you have billions of microbes and other organisms, and still they have to find each other. And for that one, a molecular dialogue evolved between the partners. And actually, each plant and each rhizobium partner has a specific language. So, like, okay, they can talk in Moldavian or Romanian and whatever. And this molecular dialogue is produced by specific chemical signals and many, many peptides or effectors. So the first interaction in the soil occurs when the plant is starving for nitrogen. In this case, I am now showing just Medicago truncatula. This is a model plants and representing alfalfa or lucerne, if you know better. So these plants then sends out from the root flavonoid molecules. And this flavonoid is only recognized by its rhizobium partner, and these molecules, plant molecules, are required to activate those genes in the bacterium which will produce a bacterial signals which induce in the plant the root nodule development and also required for infection. So these are the rhizobium signals. These are chito-oligosaccharides, and they have also different modification at the terminal sugars residues, which determines the host specificity. If you look at the form of the nodules, it can be different. Let's say if you look soybean, the nodules are spherical. If you look alfalfa, Medicago truncatula, or pea, they are elongated. And which is common that in both cases, there are giant plant cells in the nodules, which contains up to 50,000 bacteroids, which can make the nitrogen fixation. But the fate of the nodule is different. So one of them is called the terminate nodules. So it starts a cell division in the root, there will be a primordium, and then from that one, finally this nodule will grow out. But the cell division activity is switched off after the first period of cell division. This is different in the terminate nodules, where an apical meristem maintained on the top part of the root, which produce all the time cells from the cell division cycle, which can be infected, and then they will gradually differentiate into the nitrogen-fixing symbiotic cells. So in this case, in these nodules, there is also an age and developmental gradient. Why nodule is important? Nodule is important because the nodule structure gives micro aerobic conditions. So there is a layer of cells which reduce the penetration of the oxygen to the nodules, so that it can protect later the activity of the nitrogenase. And there are also a lac hemoglobin, which can locally lower the concentration of the free oxygen. Anyway, and this lac hemoglobin gives a pink color to the nodule. So it's also important because then it's easy to find out if we have a mutation. If there's no pink nodule, then it's not fixing well the nitrogen. So what is common here, that symbiotic nitrogen fixing cells are huge plant cells. Actually, they have also multiplied genome, but it doesn't matter, and they are filled with bacteria. However, if you now look at what is the fate of the bacteria, it can be completely different. Look at the morphology. In some cases, like lotus, this is a model plant for soybean also. The nitrogen-fixing bacteria are very similar to the free-living bacterium in the culture. In Medicago species, you can see that they are elongated cells. Even when 200 years ago, or maybe earlier, they made microscopic pictures of nodules, they saw that actually these are not bacteria, but maybe worms. And they can be also spherical, but nevertheless, how they look like, they can fix the nitrogen. However, the fate of the bacteria are different. So in the case of lotus or soybean, the bacteria, as I said, are similar to the free-living cells, and they can change their fate. So you can isolate the bacteria from the nodules, and they can leave free-living state. And so this can go between symbiosis and free-living state easily. This is not the case for Medicago species or for pea, because compared to the free-living cells, you can see that the nitrogen-fixing cells are really long, elongated, containing multiple nucleoids. And this means that they have also undergoing a lot of changes. So what is happening in the nodules? When the infection occurs in the younger cells, the bacteria start to multiply in the nodule cells. And then when they reach a certain cell density, then the cell division is stopped, and then a genome amplification occurs, so multiplying the genome, and this will correlate also with cell elongation. And these huge cells will be non-cultivable. They are living and functioning well in the nodules, and main function is the nitrogen fixation. But if you isolate them, they will not be able to return to the cell division cycle. So they cannot live without the outside of the plant, which is also important that during this differentiation, also the membrane permeability changing, it becomes much more fluid. So it helps very much the exchange of certain factors between the plant and the bacteria, which is very important to provide the plant with the nitrate, for example, or ammonium. But also the bacteria can get the energy from the plants in the form of sugars, and also one component which is required for the nitrogenase cofactor synthesis, the homocitrate. So if we look now how this evolved in the legume plants, you can see that this we call terminal bacteroid differentiation has multiple origin and occurs at least in 5 branches of this family. As it evolved in different branches, it shows already that maybe this has some plant benefits, and we could show that this differentiation process is really depending on the plant. So if we have a bacteria which would be able to nodulate the plant where the bacteria has reversible fate, and another one where it's terminal, the bacteroids will have different fate in the different nodules. So this is not the bacteria which will decide what kind of differentiation process they will take. So this already suggested that it has a host benefit, and many people try to compare the efficiency of this nitrogen fixing system. And for example, here there is a bradyrhizobium species which can nodulate peanut and another plant, one with terminal, other with reversible differentiation, and it provided 3 times higher nitrogenase activity. So we were also interested what can be the plant effector which makes this bacteroid differentiation, and we compared the nodule transcriptome, so which genes are expressed in Medicago nodules and which genes expressed in the lotus nodules. And for our surprise, we found 2 unique gene families with many members, which are only present in the Medicago nodules and also in related nodules from this branch of Leguminosae. And in Medicago truncatula, we found 700 genes which coded small nodule-specific cysteine-rich peptide. And which is common that these are secreted peptide, but during the synthesis of this peptide, the signal peptide will be cut off by a signal peptidase complex. And actually, this is the mature part which provides the biological function. And which is important that here only the position of the cysteines are conserved. Otherwise, the amino acid sequence is highly divergent. So therefore, these peptides have very different physicochemical properties. And this is also shown by the isoelectric point of the peptide, which goes from 3.5 to 11.3. And this peptide shows some similarity to antimicrobial peptides, especially to defensins. However, this is a separate family, but maybe evolved in these plants using defensins as a starting point. And there is also a glycine-rich family. It has also different structure. These are also secreted peptides, but no homologs exist except in these legume plants. And we have been studying what are the function of these peptides, and we can show that different sets are expressed at different stages of the development and bacteroid differentiation. And these are the major elements which can make this terminal bacteroid differentiation. Now, if we compare the biological nitrogen fixation in different legumes, you can see that the efficiency is quite different. So, for example, alfalfa or lucerne, Medicago sativa is quite good fixer, 200 kilogram fixed nitrogen per hectare, while soybean, which is the most cultivated legume, can fix only 110 kilogram nitrogen per hectare. And even to grow soybean, you need nitrogen fertilizers to have good plant growth. So the big challenge is for the future to improve the efficiency of nitrogen fixation in the existing symbiosis, or to extend biological nitrogen fixation to major crops. In my lab, we could try to improve, or we are working on improving the efficiency of the existing systems, for example, how to improve the nitrogen fixation in soybean. So what we could do, we took some NCR peptides, which are effectors of this bacteroid differentiation, and we introduced them into soybean nodules. And you can look, if you look that part of the panel where you have the Y-type situation, you can see that the bacteroids are very small, but when you express this plant gene from Medicago, then the fate of the bacteroid changes. They are also elongated, so they can be converted to a terminal reversible differentiation state. We could show, which was also a big surprise, that actually these genes, which specifically evolved in certain legumes, can use the existing activators or transcription factors which are present in the soybean nodules. So we do not need to deal with the expression and how to do it, just introduce the Medicago genomic region and it will work in soybean. Of course, this is a question, which cocktail of NCRs are needed to make really an efficient nitrogen fixation in soybean. So we have been working on that one, but actually the beginning is already quite promising. So the big challenge is really to extend biological nitrogen fixation to non-legumes. And here the targets are the major crop plants. Corn is the most produced crop globally, which is followed by wheat and rice. And as I mentioned, it's not an easy task because the nitrogenase enzyme is extremely sensitive to oxygen, and you have to provide also microaerobic conditions, but on the other hand, also increased rate of respiration, where you have to have specific cytochromes. So what are the current ongoing strategies? So one is plant engineering. There are several labs which try to produce nitrogenase enzyme complex in mitochondria and chloroplast. So this is ongoing, and these two organelles seems to be quite well suited to produce the nitrogenase. They can produce already quite good complexes, but this is not working still efficiently, and many of the work is still done in yeast, for example. So we have to go really to the plant side. The other possibility really to provide nodule-like symbiosis with rhizobium bacteria. Here, it seems to be much more tricky, but actually there is also certain luck. Because when the land plants started to evolve, the soil was absolutely infertile, and the plants would not be able to live. So they had to have a symbiosis with arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, and this fungi helped to pick up the phosphate, nitrate, water from the soil and provide it to the plants. This symbiosis works similarly a little bit to the nitrogen fixing symbiosis. So in the nitrogen fixing symbiosis, I mentioned to you that there is this NOT factor, which is produced by the bacterium, which is recognized by a specific receptors on the root surface, and then it will induce a signal transduction pathway, which will go finally to nodulation. But the mycorrhiza produce very similar NOT factors, which are recognized by similar receptors, but different receptors. But then there is a common cluster of symbiotic genes, which are used by both symbiotic systems. And as this mycorrhizal symbiosis evolved practically in all plants, this exists also in maize and wheat. So we have already the challenge to have the background, and now we have to go maybe to that steps where we can develop also nodule formation. It will not be done in the coming years, but there are hope. The other possibility to increase nitrogen fixation using diazotrophs as bioinoculants. The nitrogen fixation was discovered in 1886, and a few years later already they started to use the biofertilizers. And currently there are certain genera of prokaryotics which can fix nitrogen, and there are also several commercial biofertilizers, some of them working on the root system, some of them on the leaf system, so it's okay. What is very important, and here it's good to improve the inoculant, because usually if there is nitrogen fixation, the bacteria or archaea wants to keep it for itself. So it has to improve the secretion procedure and transportation towards the plant. The other problem, usually if there is in the soil, for example, nitrogen fertilizer, even in small amount, then we'll switch off nitrogen fixation. So we have to have also those kind of inoculums where the bacteria is insensitive to the quantity of nitrogen in the soil. These are possibilities, and there are this kind of strains already in use. So this can really increase or reduce the use of nitrogen fertilizers. So with this present strategy, when we add a lot of nitrogen fertilizers, when in agriculture they cultivate the plants, there are a lot of nitrogen losses and it goes to the air, and this is really good for the environment. You can reduce to half size and adding also diazotof together with the plants, and immediately with that one there will be much more less evaporation or contamination of the air with nitrogen. And there are also now in use those kind of fertilizers which are slowly releasing the nitrogen fertilizers, and if we combine it with diazotof, this can really reduce the nitrogen pollution, and this will be good for the future. So there are different bioaccumulants for legume crops. So here we can use nitrogen fixing bacteria plus plant growth promoting bacteria, or instead of that one we can use also arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi to help that. You can also use for non-legume crops bioinoculant when we have diazotof which form only association with these plants, and there are different bioinoculants which exist. The success limiting factor is that there is no universal solution, because this depends on the target crop, the soil type, biotic and climatic factors, the quality and the viability of bioinoculant strain in the soil. But we are on the right track, and I think this is an easier way how to improve the use of nitrogen fertilizers in an environmentally friendly way in the agriculture. So in our group, we are working on understanding the function of these symbiotic plant peptides, NCRs and GRCs, but we would like to also improve the efficiency of the nitrogen fixation. But we are also exploring the diversity of the different peptides and their physical-chemical properties. So nowadays, everybody is looking what is the impact or innovation or social benefit of the research. And one of them that we found out that actually these plant peptides are extremely good antibiotic candidates, or they can replace antibiotics, and they are also effective against those microbes which are on the WHO priority list pathogens, which cannot be treated with the conventional antibiotics, and many people die because of no proper antibiotic access. So this is a new line of research. See, sometimes there are surprising, unexpected discoveries which will take you to another way or other path, but this is which is important and interesting in the science. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much for the very useful presentation, very interesting. I would like to ask, there are experts here and online, who has questions? I see there is a hand, or it looks, yeah, please. So, Professor Boris Boincian, corresponding member of the Academy of Sciences of Moldova, please, Professor.
Dear Professor Eva Kondorosi, many thanks for your excellent presentation, very deep, very profound, very scientific, and very inspiring presentation. Really, unfortunately, yesterday, I didn't know about the content of your presentation, and I regret very much that I didn't have the possibility to discuss with you. From this point, I have many questions, and not only questions, but I would like to discuss with you. We have here in Belz, it's in the north part of Moldova, you have long-term field experience on organic agriculture, 32 years, the duration of this experiment, where we are using both annual legumes and perennial legumes in crop rotation. And I can tell you that we can be autonomous or independent in nitrogen supplying of crops. We can avoid completely mineral fertilizers. More than this, in the other long-term field experiment, we found that the nitrogen use efficiency from mineral fertilizers is only 30%. The other 70% we are losing as a oxide of nitrate of nitrogen in the atmosphere, increasing significantly global warming. So here, such data are showing how important is carbon in the soil, because we should mineral fertilizers, unfortunately, nitrogen especially, they are increasing the speed of mineralization. So what I would like to invite you to visit our institute here in Belz, because I deeply feel that we have good possibilities to cooperate in the research program. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It will be really a great pleasure to meet you and talk to your colleagues. And if we can develop any kind of collaboration, that would be great. Tomorrow in the summer school, I will give you more scientific details on biological nitrogen fixation. But yeah, I know that you are on the north part of Moldova, but we can keep the contact, and really it would be very important to discuss with you the possibilities.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. The distance between Chisinau and Budapest is decreasing, so I think that it will be possible to arrange new meetings in the near future. Thank you, Professor. Are there any other questions? Yeah, there is an opinion that the land allocated to agriculture is too large, and actually in case one uses proper technologies, then the mankind could return to the nature part of what is your opinion on this issue?
I don't know how will be our future, and actually, I think we are facing many problems in the future. One question is whether we can have enough food. The other thing is that we are going to have other pandemics, surely. And if we do not develop something against viruses, if we do not have really something against the pandemics, it will be a great problem. And we are using up the lands, yeah? And we have so animal-human contacts which never happened before. And this will happen again, and with the globalization, travel or whatever. So there are many questions for the future, how we can solve it.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Kondorosi. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have another lecture. Tomorrow, by the way, Professor Kondorosi will deliver a second lecture, and I think that in case of questions, then you can ask tomorrow as well. So the second lecture, Geodynamics and Continental Topography, will be delivered by Professor Sierd Cloetingh. So, Professor, please, you have the floor.
Ladies and gentlemen, I will take you on a little journey on the connection between the deep earth and what's happening at the surface of our Earth. And in doing so, I will focus on the continents. And the take-home message is that although the deep Earth might sound pretty remote, that it is of major concern, a major impact on what we are exposed to at the Earth surface. The traditional picture of the interior of the Earth comes from seismology. Seismology is the most important source of information on what's happening in the deep Earth. And that picture is a picture of a spherical structure of the Earth. a thin crust, of course, different in the oceans and in the continents, up to, let's say, a few tens of kilometers thick. Then we have a mantle, the silicate mantle, which is the area between the crust and the core mantle boundary. Core has a completely different composition than the mantle. And the core mantle boundary is located at a depth close to 2,900 kilometers. And the traditional view was we have heterogeneity in the crust. There's difference between the crust below the continents and the oceans, but below that crust, everything is the same. Well, fortunately enough, that's not the case. And I have been very lucky that when I entered university, just a scientific revolution had taken place in earth science, and that is the plate tectonic revolution. Plate tectonics basically is a picture of a dynamic earth, of mantle material rising up under oceanic spreading ridges, forming plates by cooling down of this material that came from deep levels. And basically, if this material is cold enough, it would like to go back again into the plate interior. And this process is called subduction. This process is creating areas of major volcanic activity, is creating earthquakes, and has been studied extensively. The initial picture was that subduction will never go deeper than levels of 700 kilometers, because that was the depth, the maximum depth of the earthquakes that were recorded in these downgoing plates. Another important point is that plate tectonics was born in the oceans. It was a byproduct of the Cold War, because the Allied powers were mapping very carefully the ocean floor, also in order to guide the operations of nuclear submarines. And plate tectonics came only later on land, so to say. Plate tectonics was also very much focusing on the horizontal motions of the plates. It did not address much the vertical motions. And for ideological reasons, because it was an Anglo-American invention, but also it did not help in the early days much to understand what's going on the continents. Basically, in the former Soviet Union, it did not have big impact. It only came in the time of Gorbachev with Glasnost and Perestroika that plate tectonics was becoming accepted. Well, the picture that we have today is a little bit different from the initial picture. What you can see here is a result of seismic tomography. This is mapping the interior of the Earth with techniques that you might know from the hospital, tomography, but you can also apply these techniques to the inner Earth. And this technique allows you to map differences in seismic velocities of waves that pass through the interior of the Earth of only a few percent. And what you see here is a seismic tomography cross-section between the Earth's surface and the core mantle boundary at a depth of close to 3,000 kilometers. What you see here in blue is basically the signature of a downgoing plate mapped by seismic tomography as a zone of higher seismic velocities. What means higher seismic velocities? It means a cold plate, because the waves go faster in colder material than in hotter material. What you can see is also a stippled line at a depth of 700 kilometers. This is the zone of phase transitions in the mantle. And this was originally seen as the boundary between the upper mantle and the lower mantle, and basically as the limit to which plates would go down, because they would meet this phase change, and it would be impossible to penetrate this discontinuity. And this is indeed the case if you look into this picture on your side, basically on my side, the right side. on your side, the left side. And you see there a downgoing slab to a level of 700 kilometers. And you see overlying it is a red area. This is a zone of low seismic velocities, of a hot upper mantle, which is produced by this downgoing slab. But you see also blue going all the way to the core mantle boundary. And this deeper slab is not characterized by earthquakes, but it can still be detected by seismic tomography. So we see two graveyards of the downgoing plates, one at a level of 700 kilometers and another one at the core mantle boundary and at a depth of close to 3,000 kilometers. So with seismic tomography, basically, we can reconstruct the fate of oceanic plates which do not longer exist. They have been basically put all the way down. And what is also very nice, this core mantle boundary is not only the graveyard of the tectonic plates, but it is also the area where sooner or later material might start to get up again, rising plumes. And this is something which is very fascinating. And this is basically a picture from computational geodynamics, which is booming business in our field, also to model the processes in the deep earth and at the surface. And you see here the core part of the earth in the center. You see here also a plate in blue that goes down, but you see also areas where material goes up again from the core mantle boundary. Plumes we see in areas like below Iceland. We have them in the Pacific, and they are very important in, let's say, in what's going on in the deep earth. And I will say a few words about them later on. So altogether, a pretty lively picture. Well, Topo Europe has been a program that I started some years ago with a group of solid earth scientists in Europe, focusing on the connection between these deep earth processes and what's going on at the surface. We took continental Europe and its margins with the surrounding oceans as a natural laboratory to look for the interaction between the deep earth and the earth's surface. And again, you see here different panels for different seismic tomography cross-sections for different parts of Europe. This time, they don't go down all the way to 3,000 kilometers, but the sections are limited till depths of around 700 kilometers. In blue, you see the downgoing plates. You see here on the right-hand side, you see basically the plate. Let me go back here. You see basically a plate going down under the Aegean. You see another blue zone under Spain, the Gibraltar Arc, where also a plate goes down to deep levels. But you see also a plate going down under the Carpathians. And overlying these blue areas, the downgoing plates, you see red. And that means a hot upper mantle with reduced seismic velocities. So you see a lot of heterogeneity in our continent, if you look in more detail. And that's very interesting. That makes it possible to study the connection between Earth topography and surface processes for different parts of Europe, because different parts are in different stages of the evolution, but also for Europe as a whole. So the message here was continental topography is the product of the interaction between processes operating deep in the earth, but also processes operating on the surface, like erosion, like processes affected by climate, and of course, what's kept happening in the atmosphere. It also implies that its understanding requires a multidisciplinary approach. That's why we formulated a big European program. We could convince 23 countries to put some money on it, 14.5 million euro, enough to keep 60 young researchers off the street from all over Europe. The Spanish even collected a different amount of money only for Iberia, another 8 million euro. And if you look to this map, you might realize that Iberia has a pretty high topography. The average elevation of Iberia is higher than the average elevation of Switzerland. And we were very much interested in what is the cause for this topography. And the cause for the topography is very much in the upper mantle below Iberia, resulting from a hot upper mantle, because when mantle material is hot, it is expanding and it pushes up the overlying crust. Same thing is what we can see in Norway. Norway has extensive mountains and is going up. According to plate tectonic theory, this should not happen because mountains are formed at plate boundaries where plates are meeting each other. But we have a lot of topography in the middle of the plate. And again, this is not created by collision of plates. This has to do with things like a hot upper mantle, which is pushing the material on top of it upward. So if you look to Europe, you see a lot of interesting topography. You see also in the interior a lot of seismic activity, not only in the Mediterranean, where Africa is meeting Europe, but also in areas like the mountains under southern Norway. And also in areas like the Rhine Rift and areas like Spain, areas which are not at the plate boundaries. And this is also a very interesting result because plate tectonics started as a theory which basically said all the deformation in the plates is at the plate boundaries. The plate interiors are rigid. Well, that's not exactly the case. That they are not rigid is also clear if we look to the distribution of the vertical motions. And again, the attention for vertical motions is relatively recent because they are more difficult to measure with satellites than horizontal motions. And what you see at this map of Europe, you see areas with pluses, areas which go up today, and including southern Norway, but also the Carpathians, Spain, but also areas which go down, like the Pannonian Basin of Hungary, the Western Mediterranean, North Sea Basin. So differential motions. It's not a uniform thing. And again, this is the signature of ongoing deformation in the interior of the European plate. Well, seismic risk maps of Europe have traditionally focused on the Mediterranean area. And that's what you clearly can see here, Greece, Italy, Anatolia, for obvious reasons. Also, of course, for the band zone of the Carpathians, where we have the Francia area with significant seismic activity. But there's also something going on in the rest of Europe. The magnitudes are smaller, but there is also activity. And one of the very interesting areas for that is the Pannonian Carpathian system. And you see, of course, the cluster of seismicity in the band zone of the Romanian Carpathians, not far from here. Francia, very important area for people who study geodynamics, because it is an area where a slab is breaking off. Slovenia, a lot of seismic activity, but also the Pannonian Basin itself. And please notice that this area has a lot of nuclear reactors, even nuclear reactors which are now under construction. So it's important to notice this, that there is deformation also here, which has major implications. This is also to the northern side of the Alps. The Alps are created by the collision between Africa and Europe. But what's going on in this collision zone has an impact also in the areas to the north of it. And here you see the distribution of the earthquakes in the Alpine foreland. And you see basically there's earthquake activity all the way from Basel, even into the Kingdom of the Netherlands. And the earthquakes clearly like the Rhine Valley. The Rhine Valley is an extensional rift. It has been formed by an attempt to break apart France and Germany. Fortunately enough, it did not result in the formation of an ocean. And that is good news also in view of the importance of these countries for the European Union. What is very important that this area is a major area of concentration of industrial and economic infrastructure. And you see that the Rhine Rift is bounded by faults. And you see here the fault separating the Rhine Rift from the adjacent forges. And this is a very important structure. A structure which is part of the European Cenozoic rift system, because this is a relatively recent rift. Topography has major societal implications, not only, let's say, for landslides in mountain belts or unstable coastal areas, but also for what's happening at the transition between the continental shelves and the deep sea, like in the northern Atlantic. And you see here a zone indicated northwest of the British Isles and Norway, where we have that transition and where we had tsunamis in the geological past that also washed away some of the ecosystem in the surrounding countries. And this is of major importance because this is really also of some concern for the oil industry. When they drill, they are very afraid always to trigger landslides in this area. So these things have been mapped very well. You see also in pink the area that I just discussed, the Rhine Rift, where basically we have a major concentration of infrastructure. And also this is an area where basically topography has an impact, because there is a lot of differential topography between the Rhine Rift and the surrounding Black Forest and Forges area. If we look again in the northern Atlantic, seismic tomography has learned us a lot also about that area. This is a horizontal slice through the upper mantle at a depth between 100 and 200 kilometers. And in the red, you see the area with low seismic velocities, expressing basically the presence of a hot upper mantle. And in this case, in the northern Atlantic, you might notice that this is coinciding with Iceland and the mid-Atlantic ridge. This is the expression under Iceland of a mega plume. A mega plume that rises up all the way from 3,000 kilometers under Iceland to the surface. It's good news for Iceland in terms of geothermal energy, because Iceland can be completely basically supplied by energy because of this hot upper mantle, geothermal. It is bad news, of course, for Iceland, because it goes along with volcanic activity. What is also interesting are the side lobes, also marked in the red, which go all the way from the mid-Atlantic to areas like the mountains under southern Norway, which have always been an enigma to the earth science community. What on hell is creating these things far away from the plate boundaries? Well, we know now the answer: the hot upper mantle, a byproduct of the Iceland plume. You see also a side lobe that goes to the western part of the British Isles, where we also have recent volcanic activity, also an enigma, because we are far away from the plate boundary. And you see even a little bit of red in the area not far from the Kingdom of the Netherlands, in particular in the Eifel area of northwestern Germany, where our predecessors have witnessed volcanic activity in the middle of the European continent. And we were always basically intrigued by this. What is this? How can this happen? It's not like in Japan at the rim of the Pacific, the Ring of Fire. It's not in the Mediterranean, it's in the middle of Europe. Should not be there, but it is there. Well, we have also a lot of information from the satellites. So our knowledge of the deep Earth is not only based on seismology, but is also to a large extent, we know a lot about what's happening in the deep Earth from satellite-derived gravity anomalies. And in this roundy structure, you see basically what the satellites, which have been designed by the German Research Center for Geosciences in Potsdam, have found out. In red, you see the areas where we have a deficit in mass. So hot upper mantle, mantle that is hotter than the standard mantle, northern Atlantic, but also the Alpine Mediterranean area. But you see also areas in blue, and these are areas where we have excess mass. So we have too much gravity, so to say. And that's south of India, but also in the middle of Africa in the Congo basin, where we have a basin which we cannot explain otherwise than by something must bring it down. We don't know what it does, but it's probably something pretty deep in the mantle, a cold spot. So we do not only have hot spots, so to say, but we have also cold spots. If you look to Europe, you see a similar picture. You see a lot of brownish colors under, for example, Anatolia, which is a plateau. It's high elevation. Yeah, Turkey has a very high heat flow. It's good news for them, for geothermal energy. And it's not as big as the Tibetan plateau, but it's something. But you see Spain, also brownish. The Atlas Mountains of northwestern Morocco, also created by a hot upper mantle below it. But you see also areas in blue, which are too cold. And one of these areas is the southern Caspian Basin, where we have a huge depression with 20 kilometers of sediments. And if I tell you that the average crustal thickness is around 30 kilometers, then you might realize that something dramatic is needed to bring the crust down to create a space for this 20 kilometers of sediments. So this is what we call a super deep basin. That's all very exciting. Another very exciting result of the last decade has been that the breakup of continents and the creation of an ocean like the Northern Atlantic, and this is a schematic cross-section through the Northern Atlantic, all the way from Norway to the Atlantic Ocean, where we go from continental crust to oceanic crust, that the area in between is characterized by a lot of volcanic activity at deeper levels. So volcanic activity is not limited to active plate boundaries, like the in the Pacific, Japan, etc. But we have also a lot of volcanic activities, again, inside the plate, because this transition between ocean and continent is what we call a rifted margin, a passive margin. It means no subduction zone, just a transition. Yeah? That's why these things in the beginning were seen as tectonically dead. Well, they are not tectonically dead. They actively subside. And if you look to this ellipse down in this slide, you see that basically half of these passive margins around the world, the transition between ocean and continent in an opening ocean, like the Indian Ocean, like the Atlantic Ocean, are of volcanic nature. So we call these things now volcanic rifted margins. And they are of major importance as the sites of extensive development of sedimentary basins. They are of major importance in the search for hydrocarbons. And traditionally, we had two classes of the formation of these passive margins. One was basically that they are created by plate tectonic forces, and this is what we call the mode of passive rifting. And in the other part of this diagram, you see the word active. That means created by a plume that comes from below and creates a lot of magmatic activity, etc. But there are a lot of intermediate cases. So we have come up recently with a new classification, semi-active, semi-passive, and purely passive and purely active. Again, in the beginning days of plate tectonics, we were a little bit thinking in terms of end members. The plate boundary is active, the plate interiors, nothing happens. Now we know there's a whole spectrum in between. What is also interesting is, of course, that in Europe, we are in a very good shape to model these things and to study it, because the volcanic rifted margins of Norway are the best studied volcanic rifted margin on the globe. Why? Well, they have created the economic prosperity for Norway because they are the site of extensive development of hydrocarbons. Yeah. So they have been mapped. They have been drilled. They have been studied by seismic reflection data. They have been subject of an enormous amount of studies, not only for basic science, but also for applied science. And in earth sciences, there is no boundary between applied science and basic science. It's basically a continuum. Another natural laboratory for Topo Europe has been the Alps, Pannonian Basin, Carpathian system. Completely different case, but also very interesting. Apart from that, Iberia, Aegean, but I will not talk about that for the sake of time. Let's go immediately to the Pannonian, Carpathian, Alpine belt. What you see here is a block diagram. In the middle is the Pannonian Basin. And you see here in red, you see here the upwelling of mantle material under the basin. This is what we call asthenosphere, mantle partially molten. On top of it, you see in light brown, you see the lithosphere. And the lithosphere can be divided in two parts, the crust, but also a piece of the mantle that has been solidified. And you can see this asthenospheric dome is coming pretty close to the surface. This makes basically the Pannonian Basin the hottest basin in continental Europe. So this is an El Dorado, so to say, for geothermal energy. And I would very strongly recommend basically my Hungarian colleagues, and they study this, to go further in this, because this is a very good site for geothermal energy. Well, what is also very interesting is that on the side, on the Romanian side, under the Carpathians, the slab is going down. And the slab is breaking off at this moment. And to make it even worse, Adria on the west is pushing also this part of the world, putting it under compression. It's a young basin. It was formed pretty young on geological terms. It was formed by extension, but today it is under compression. So it is a fantastic natural laboratory to study the temporal evolution of a basin system. And even more, to study this process of the end of subduction. Because we have two very important issues: how to start subduction and how to end it. And the Carpathian Belt is one of the prime natural laboratories in the world to study this process of the death of a subduction zone. Well, if you form the Pannonian Basin, you do it by extension, what we call. You try to break it apart. That has not been successful because it's not an ocean yet. It will not become an ocean because now it's under compression. A very important model for this is what we call the stretching model, which characterizes what's happening in terms of the initial thickness of the crust and the lithosphere and the result of this tectonic extension. If this beta factor, which is the ratio between, let's say, the initial thickness of the crust and the lithosphere and the final thickness of the crust and the lithosphere after extension, if this factor is 1, it means nothing has happened. If this factor is infinite, it means you have stretched away the whole continent. You've created an ocean. Well, we had always bright students in our projects, including very bright Hungarian and Romanian students. And one of them made this map of crustal stretching in the Pannonian Basin based on hundreds of kilometers of seismic lines, hundreds of wells drilled for the oil industry. And you see here in different colors the stretching distribution. If you see here brownies, it means the stretching factor 2. So you have stretched away half of the crust. If you see something more yellow, you have stretched away with a factor of 1.4. So we have this information. And with this, you can make thermal models. And with this, you can make prediction for geothermal energy and oil and gas. Well, this is a more recent result, also by one of our bright Hungarian students. And this is on a small scale in the crust, which is indicated by blue color. And the layers on top of that are the sedimentary layers. And the red line is separating the phase of rifting from the phase where rifting finishes. And you see faults here, which are basically not a signature of the painful processes experienced by the crust during this attempt to break it up. This is on the scale, let's say, where we have the information from seismic reflection data from the oil industry, from drilling for oil and gas. But we can also go deeper. And this is a cross-section all the way from Adria to the Carpathians. You see the red line is the boundary between the hot upper mantle and the overlying lithosphere and crust. And again, you see a lot of variability. You see how dangerously close this hot upper mantle has come to the surface under the Pannonian Basin. So this process of rifting has expressions at different scales. And that is characteristic for modern earth sciences, this multi-scale approach. We are not looking only at outcrops, we look at different scales. Well, the Pannonian Basin is a prime example of a sedimentary basin. Sedimentary basins are all over the globe. They are in the middle of continents. They are at the margins of continents. And this is a map of major sedimentary basins of the world. Why are they important? They are hosting mankind's main resources, not only oil and gas, but also fresh water. And they are the recorder of past Earth history. They are the recorder of sea level change and climate. So the Earth has an excellent memory also for processes where basically the plate tectonics has basically recycled back to former oceans. It's all stored in the sedimentary basins. And I have been very lucky that at a certain moment, early in my career, I met the head of global geology of Royal Dutch Shell, Peter Ziegler, Swiss geologist, who was the head of the global geology research group in Shell International. And he introduced me to these sedimentary basins. And this has kept me off the street since then. We realized that when we talk about sea level change, that we have to look into the record of the basins. And this is a nice outcrop here, where a group of geologists is looking at the rocks, reading the rocks, so to say. And we realized that sea level is not only fluctuating level of the water, but also has to do with fluctuations in the position of the topography. So we called this review paper in science, we called it Inherited Landscapes and Sea Level Change. It's a system. And we have to realize there are different actors in the system. Well, when we talk about Europe, we are very lucky. We have a hot upper mantle. We know this from seismic tomography, and you see here a seismic tomography section basically passing through the Pannonian Basin. You see the slab going down in blue under Francia, Romanian Carpathians. You see in red the overlying hot upper mantle under the Pannonian Basin. You have just seen what happens in the crust and the asthenosphere and in the lithosphere of the Pannonian Basin, but you must also realize that it's not limited to tectonic activity to that level. It even goes deeper because the whole upper mantle is hot till depths of 400 kilometers. And then you see at deeper levels between 600 and 800 kilometers, you see again blue. This is the graveyard of the tectonic plates of the past. We have also a hot upper mantle in northwestern Europe, under the Massif Central and under the Eifel region. And here plumes rise up, small plumes, all the way from depths of 700 kilometers, all the way to the surface. And a very beautiful example is the Eifel region. That is basically a finger-shaped penetration of a small plume. The radius is less than 100 kilometers. And this thing was found a few years ago by German seismologists who put a seismic network. And this is completely different than what we see under Iceland. Under Iceland, we have a mega plume coming all the way from the core mantle boundary. This is a small one. That's why this thing was called a baby plume. Yeah, not because it will grow into a big one, no, but it's so small. This thing was basically not reported for quite a while for other areas of the world. So we were a little bit fascinated by this. We said, are the European seismologists better than the seismologists in other parts of the world? Or is this something extremely limited to Europe? Is Europe so unique? Well, fortunately enough, ladies and gentlemen, our colleagues in China found very soon afterwards, they spent, let's say, a factor 100 more money on this than what we did in Europe. They also found them in Southeast Asia. So it's a worldwide phenomena. And it has important implications for degassing of the mantle. These plumes have another important effect, that when they rise up to the surface, they are not only producing an uplift, like what we see under Hawaii in the oceans, but in the continent, also they produce differential topography. They can even produce basins. And what you see in this slide here in dark blue is there is downthrusting of the mantle lithosphere around it. Decoupling of the crust from the underlying mantle. And this is subduction. So we are with a plume, we are initiating subduction in the middle of a continent. And that is a very interesting new insight, something that we learned only a few years ago. This whole process of plume-induced subduction initiation is a frontier in science. We know it works the best if the plume is hitting a relatively weak lithosphere and crust, because it can then really penetrate to it. If I put a similar thing, a plume, under a very old continent, it has no chance, because the old continent is too strong. So also here we see the interaction between the mechanics of the overlying lithosphere and the dynamics from deeper levels. We cannot separate them separately. Well, the Pannonian Carpathian system, I mentioned before, is a beautiful area to study Earth processes. The previous slides, I was talking about the start of subduction. As I mentioned before, here we see under the Francia area, we see the end of subduction. The nice thing is here that this whole process of getting rid of the lower part of the slab under the Carpathians is also a very nice explanation for the rapid uplift of the Carpathian Mountains. The Carpathian Mountains shed sediments in the foredeep, which is called the Foxani Depression. This is the deepest continental foredeep in the world. What is also interesting, that this foredeep is now full. There's no capacity anymore to store sediments. The rest of it is going into the Black Sea. And if we study the sequences in the Black Sea, we can basically record the uplift history of the Carpathians. So this is also a very important part of the Topo Europe research program in an area not far from where you live. The process of slab detachment is a very interesting process. The Germans have installed some years ago their seismic network, studied in detail how this process happens. Really painful process to get rid of the lower part of a tectonic slab, but very interesting. And you might say, well, this is all very interesting, deep Earth. What is it doing basically for the current agenda for the Green Deal of the European Commission, for example? Well, this Topo Europe program has given us a very important science base for energy resources. Not only, let's say, for the traditional ones, hydrocarbons, but also for geothermal energy. This is a map of the heat flow in Europe. The areas in pink are the areas basically where I have a low heat flow. The areas in yellow and brown are the areas where I have a high heat flow. And you might immediately notice that the areas of high heat flow include the Pannonian Basin of Hungary, but also major parts of France, Western Mediterranean, and Turkey, and even some parts of the Netherlands. And I can tell you that today, if you would eat a Dutch tomato, which I would not recommend, it comes from the greenhouses, but it is produced with geothermal energy. In the past, it was produced with natural gas. Now, the whole heating system goes very strongly into geothermal. Well, geothermal systems are on the move. It means pumping in water from the surface and then pumping it up again to the surface. the same service know-how that you need here is the same service know-how that we have from hydrocarbon exploration. And practically the whole of Netherlands is covered with 3D seismic lines. So we are an exporter of, let's say, models for geothermal energy exploration. And we do this to countries which are in a much better position than the Netherlands. To give you a picture of the cost predictions that we made a few years ago, you see basically here a map, what is the present situation, the cost in euro per unit of production. And you see already at that time, situation was already quite good for areas like Turkey, Pannonian Basin, Tuscany, but also promising for areas like the Netherlands and southeastern France. Picture is even better if we go to 2030 and 2050, the whole of Europe is red. So we see a complete switch in terms of energy supply, where the countries which are now the prime producers of oil and gas, to the east, the Far East, are not in a situation where they are favorably located for geothermal energy. And that basically our part of Europe is essentially in a very good position, in particular for heating. For electricity, it's still a different game, but also that is moving in the right direction, also due to the advances in drilling technology. And I'm very happy that Hungarian researchers, in a cooperation with our tectonic group, are very active in this, and that we further can develop this also in European projects, not only with Hungary, but other countries. This is a picture of a ceremony, a PhD defense in Utrecht University. And you see at the front, Esther Bekesi, very happy with her diploma. And she and her husband returned to Hungary, to the Hungarian National Institute for Earth Physics and Space Physics, to further develop what basically we learned in the cooperation with them. And you can see a PhD defense in Netherlands is pretty formal, but I can assure you that what happened afterwards was not so formal. Okay, Europe today has a fantastic infrastructure, at least for the countries who have joined the European Plate Observing System, which is an integration of national facilities, volcanic laboratories, seismic stations, laboratory equipments, integrating for more than 500 million euro of solid earth research infrastructure. Quite a few countries are members of it. Some others have not yet joined, including Hungary, but we sincerely hope they will join. The Netherlands has joined, and the motivation is for geothermal energy, induced earthquakes, subsidence and geological storage, river and estuary morphodynamics, sea level change, and we have already here an investment of 27 million euro on the national level. So it pays off to be part of a European project. And in conclusion, Europe, through its excellent laboratories, high level of integrated solid earth science, links to other science fields, has a very strong potential to be at the forefront of connecting frontier science with societal relevance. Applies both to geoenergy and natural hazards, and the science base is now rapidly developing to bring geothermal energy into power also in plate interiors, significantly enhancing its contribution to the global energy transition. Well, it's all about people. This is a picture of a group of researchers in our own tectonic laboratory in Utrecht, and I hope that you will agree with me that it looks to be a fairly happy crowd. I'd like to leave it here. Thanks for your attention.
Yeah, dear Professor Cloetingh, thank you very much for this very interesting presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, tomorrow we'll meet again. And my suggestion is to leave questions for tomorrow. And in case there are, I know that there are experts from our Institute of Seismology, you can just approach. Because now we are a little late and should follow the agenda of the day. So in case somebody insists to put a question, please. Otherwise, we can leave for tomorrow. Yeah, please.
It was a big pleasure to live this useful topic for us, especially in global geodynamics. For us in Republic of Moldova, we focused on sedimentary of Eastern European platform, and our colleagues in seismology focused on earthquake from branches that take part from this system of Alps, Pannonian, Carpathians. It's very interesting topic for us, very useful. Thank you. And I remember my experience in Utrecht University. It's a very interesting place, a good team for research. And this picture from PhD defense, I remember I participated on one defense. It's a good tradition and very interesting. In our very little differ, but if only small questions, how do you think it's easy and it's rentable to obtain this geo energy from this area? Because in estimation, it must be cost more than 7 meters to obtain this energy. But it's a very high price for this infrastructure.
Yeah, thanks for your question. And first of all, thanks a lot for your presence here. Because we are in the phase, and I will talk about it tomorrow, to design the next phase of Top Europe. And I'm very happy that Moldova is a member of the Cost Association, which provides funding opportunities. And of course, there are also other funding opportunities. So I look forward to continuing this cooperation that you already have with Dutch researchers. Your remark about, let's say, the depth of drilling. Yes. Deep drilling is essential for areas, let's say, where we have an intermediate heat flow, if we go for electricity. But for heating, it is not needed. To give you an idea, Schlumberger, huge company in France, is now in an effort to transform the whole heat supply in the Paris basin, including the Paris city area, to geothermal. And for that, we don't have to drill till 7 kilometers. If we drill a few kilometers, that's more than enough. Iceland, and there we drill into the magma. That's a different story. And there, basically, the conditions for electricity generation are splendid. But for most of the areas that I discussed, the conditions are already quite good for heating, including even the Netherlands, which might not immediately come to your radar if you talk about geothermal.
Okay, thank you. So it seems that we should now continue according to the agenda. Thank you very much for your presentation, dear Professor, and for your presence here, the attendees, and for questions. And I would like to remind that tomorrow there will be 2 lectures presented in the framework of the summer school. Who is interested, tomorrow we can continue the discussion of these very, very important issues. So all the best to you, and I hope to see many of you tomorrow. Bye.